God says, "I am about to restore what you thought was gone forever." Jesus says, "Stop explaining it away, stop convincing yourself it cannot happen, and simply watch." Archangel Michael says, "Do not look away from this message, because what follows is speaking directly to something you buried a long time ago, something you decided was permanently lost, something you stopped hoping for so you would stop being disappointed. Stay here. Do not scroll past this." Something specific already came to mind the moment you read that first sentence. A relationship. A dream. A version of yourself. A season of peace that once existed and then disappeared. Whatever it was, it surfaced instantly, almost against your will, because some part of you never actually stopped hoping, even after you told yourself you had. This message is speaking directly to that thing. Breathe. Let your shoulders drop. Whatever defenses you have built around that particular loss, whatever explanations you have used to protect yourself from continuing to hope, set them down for just a few minutes. This message deserves your full, undivided presence. Here is something worth understanding honestly before this message goes any further. Restoration rarely arrives the way people expect it to. It does not usually look like the exact same thing returning, unchanged, exactly as it was before it disappeared. It usually looks like something new, something that carries the essence of what was lost while taking a shape suited specifically to who you have become since losing it. This matters, because if you are waiting for an identical return of exactly what was taken, you may miss the actual restoration when it finally arrives, simply because it does not match the specific picture you have been holding on to. Stay open to that possibility as you continue through this reflection. Think about the specific thing you believed was permanently gone. Name it clearly, even if only silently. A relationship that ended in a way that felt final. A dream you set aside so long ago it started to feel embarrassing to still want it. A sense of peace or joy that existed before a specific loss, illness, or betrayal took it from you. A version of yourself, more confident, more alive, more free, that seemed to disappear somewhere along the way. Give yourself genuine time with this reflection, rather than settling immediately for whatever comes to mind first. Sometimes there is more than one thing this message could be speaking to, and identifying which one carries the most genuine weight right now can help you focus your attention more effectively than trying to address everything simultaneously. Whatever it is real. It mattered. And its loss genuinely hurt, in ways you may have never fully expressed to anyone. This message is not minimizing that loss. It is not rushing past the genuine grief that loss required. It is simply asking you to consider, honestly, whether the door you closed on that particular hope might not be as permanently sealed as you have convinced yourself it is. Here is why so many people convince themselves certain losses are permanent, even when they are not. Hope, once disappointed badly enough, starts to feel dangerous. The mind learns to protect itself by declaring certain doors closed forever, because continuing to hope, and being disappointed again, feels unbearable to risk a second time. This is not weakness. It is self-protection. It made sense, given what you went through. But self-protection, left unexamined for too long, sometimes calcifies into something that no longer actually protects you. It simply keeps you from receiving something that may genuinely still be available. Consider whether this particular pattern has been operating in your own relationship with whatever you believe was permanently lost. Think about the specific moment you first decided this particular door was permanently closed. Was there a specific event that triggered that decision, or did it develop more gradually, quietly hardening over time without any single, identifiable turning point. Understanding how this particular belief actually formed can help you examine whether it still genuinely reflects your current circumstances, or whether it has simply persisted through habit and repetition long after the original protective purpose it once served. Here is something worth understanding about why this message speaks with such directness today, refusing to let you continue explaining this particular loss away with the usual reasoning you have relied on for so long. Archangel Michael says, "Stop explaining, because explanation has become a way of avoiding the more vulnerable, more honest question underneath it." The explanation sounds reasonable. It is just gone. Too much time has passed. People do not come back from that. Some doors simply do not reopen. These explanations feel protective. They also, quietly, keep you from remaining open to something that may not actually be as finished as you have decided it is. Consider, honestly, whether your particular explanation is genuinely, completely accurate, or whether it has simply become comfortable, familiar, easier to repeat than to question. Here is something worth sitting with regarding the specific nature of restoration as this message describes it. Restoration does not require reversing time. It does not require pretending the loss never happened, or that the years since then did not genuinely change you. It simply means something valuable, connected to what was lost, becoming available to you again, in whatever form actually fits who you are now. Picture restoration less like rewinding a film back to an earlier scene, and more like a river continuing to flow forward, eventually reaching a destination that carries the same essential water, the same essential source, even though the specific path it traveled to get there looked nothing like simply retracing its earlier course. What was lost continues to exist, in some form, within the larger flow of your life, even when its exact original shape cannot be perfectly recreated. If the specific thing you lost was a relationship, restoration might not mean that exact relationship returning unchanged. It might mean a different relationship entirely, carrying the same quality of connection you once had, arriving in a form better suited to who you have become since the original loss. If the specific thing you lost was a dream, restoration might not mean pursuing it in exactly the same way you once imagined. It might mean a related expression of that same underlying desire, adapted to your current circumstances and capabilities, still carrying the same essential meaning the original dream once held for you. If the specific thing you lost was a sense of peace or joy, restoration might not mean returning to the exact same circumstances that once produced that peace. It might mean discovering that same quality of peace again, through different circumstances, built on a foundation strengthened specifically by everything you survived since it was originally lost. Stay open to this kind of restoration, rather than requiring an exact, unchanged return of precisely what disappeared. Here is something Jesus is specifically asking you to stop doing today. Stop explaining away the moments when hope quietly surfaces anyway, despite your best efforts to keep it firmly buried. You know exactly what this looks like. A specific thought that arrives unbidden. A specific feeling that rises during an unguarded moment. A specific coincidence that feels almost too precise to be random, quickly dismissed before you allow yourself to actually consider what it might mean. Stop dismissing these moments so quickly. Notice them instead. Sit with them, even briefly, before rushing to explain them away as nothing. Consider how many times recently something has nudged at this particular hope, only to be quickly buried again beneath the same tired explanations you have relied on for protection. Notice that pattern honestly, without judgment, simply as information worth examining. Here is something worth understanding about the specific timing of restoration. since timing rarely matches what a person originally expected or hoped for. Restoration frequently arrives after significant, sometimes lengthy periods of apparent stillness, periods where nothing visible seems to be happening, periods that can stretch on long enough to convince a person that nothing ever will happen. This particular stillness is not evidence that restoration is impossible. It is often simply evidence that the necessary preparation, both within you and within whatever circumstances need to align, has not yet fully completed. Preparation frequently happens invisibly, beneath the surface, long before its results become visible. Consider whether you have mistaken this kind of invisible preparation for permanent absence, simply because the visible results have not yet appeared. Here is something worth understanding about your own role in this particular process, since restoration rarely happens purely passively, without any genuine participation from the person receiving it. This does not mean forcing or manufacturing an outcome through sheer effort alone. It means remaining genuinely open, genuinely willing to notice and respond when genuine opportunity actually appears, rather than remaining so committed to your protective explanation that you would fail to recognize restoration even if it arrived directly in front of you. Consider what it would mean to hold this particular hope with open hands rather than a clenched fist, neither desperately grasping for a specific outcome nor completely closing yourself off from the possibility entirely. Here is something worth naming honestly about fear, since fear likely plays a significant role in why you have kept this particular door so firmly closed. Fear of hoping again and being disappointed a second time. Fear that allowing yourself to want this again means admitting how much its original loss actually hurt. Fear that even discussing this possibility somehow jinxes it, an old superstition that persists even in people who would consciously reject superstitious thinking if asked directly. Reflect honestly on which of these fears, or perhaps some combination, feels most present in your own particular resistance to this message's central message today. Here is something worth understanding about what genuinely examining that fear might actually look like. Ask yourself honestly what the actual cost would be of allowing yourself to hope again, even cautiously, even while still protecting yourself reasonably from becoming completely emotionally dependent on a specific outcome. Consider whether that cost is genuinely as unbearable as your fear currently suggests it would be, or whether you have already survived comparable disappointment before, and found a way through it. Most people, examining this honestly, discover they possess more resilience regarding disappointment than their fear typically credits them with, resilience already proven through everything they have already survived up to this point in their lives. Here is something worth understanding about specific, practical steps that might connect to whatever restoration this message is pointing toward in your own particular life. If your particular loss involves a relationship, this might mean finally allowing yourself to reach out, or finally allowing yourself to remain open if someone else reaches out to you, rather than immediately closing that door out of old, protective habit. If your particular loss involves a dream, this might mean researching one small, current possibility connected to that original dream, rather than continuing to assume it remains entirely, permanently inaccessible. If your particular loss involves a sense of peace or joy, this might mean identifying one small, concrete action that could begin cultivating that same quality of feeling again, even in a modest, initial form. Whatever specific action feels most relevant to your own particular situation, consider taking it, or at least seriously considering it, within the coming days, rather than allowing this reflection to fade without any corresponding, concrete response. Here is something worth understanding about doubt, since doubt has likely already arisen as you have continued reading this particular message. A quiet voice suggesting this is simply generic, hopeful language, disconnected from any genuine relevance to your own specific, particular circumstances. Consider whether that doubt reflects genuine, careful evaluation, or whether it reflects the same protective pattern this message has already been describing throughout its content, the pattern that quickly explains away anything that might reopen a hope you decided long ago to permanently close. Notice which one feels more accurate as you sit honestly with the question. Here is something worth understanding about what genuine, healthy hope actually requires, since this message is not suggesting reckless, unrealistic optimism disconnected from reasonable judgment. Genuine hope does not require ignoring genuine reality or forcing a specific outcome that circumstances genuinely do not support. It simply requires remaining honestly open to possibility, rather than prematurely, permanently closing a door that circumstances may not actually require you to keep closed forever. Consider what it would mean to hold both realistic acknowledgement of genuine difficulty and genuine openness to eventual restoration simultaneously, rather than needing to choose one exclusively over the other. Here is something worth understanding about support during this particular process, since navigating renewed hope, especially after significant previous disappointment, often benefits from additional perspective beyond what purely private, individual reflection alone can fully provide. Consider whether a trusted friend, someone who witnessed the original loss and understands its genuine significance, might offer valuable perspective as you consider whether this particular door genuinely remains as permanently closed as you have believed. If professional support feels relevant to processing whatever grief accompanied this original loss, consider this a legitimate, valuable resource as well, particularly if that grief has never been fully processed and continues quietly influencing your capacity for renewed hope even now. Here is something worth understanding about what genuinely changes once you allow yourself to hold this particular hope honestly again, rather than continuing to suppress it beneath protective explanation. Many people report significant relief simply from finally acknowledging a hope they had been suppressing, distinct entirely from whether the specific hoped-for outcome eventually materializes or not. There is genuine relief simply in finally being honest with yourself about what you actually still want, rather than continuing to perform a settled acceptance you do not genuinely, fully feel. Consider what this particular relief might feel like for you personally, imagining, as specifically as you genuinely can, what it might mean to finally stop explaining this particular hope away and instead simply, honestly, allow yourself to feel it fully. Here is something worth understanding about the specific relationship between restoration and your own personal growth throughout the period since the original loss occurred. You are not the same person you were when this particular loss first happened. You have grown, changed, learned things you did not know then, developed capacities you did not previously possess. This means that even if restoration eventually arrives in a form resembling what was originally lost, you will be receiving it as a genuinely different person than the one who originally lost it. Consider what this means for how you might actually experience eventual restoration, potentially with greater wisdom, greater appreciation, and greater capacity to actually sustain and nurture it well, compared to how you might have handled it during the earlier period before this particular loss and everything you learned through surviving it. Here is something worth understanding about the specific timeline you might reasonably expect for whatever restoration this message is pointing toward, since unrealistic expectations regarding exact timing often produce unnecessary discouragement. This message cannot promise you a specific date or a specific, guaranteed outcome. What it can offer is genuine encouragement to remain honestly open, rather than prematurely, permanently closing a door that may not actually require permanent closure. Consider releasing the need for a specific timeline, while still maintaining genuine openness to whatever unfolds, trusting that genuine restoration, when it arrives, typically arrives at exactly the right moment for both you and whatever circumstances need to align around it. Here is a further consideration worth holding as you continue engaging with this particular message and its central invitation. This message is not promising that every single specific loss eventually reverses or restores in exactly the way a person might hope. Some losses genuinely remain permanent, and pretending otherwise would not serve you honestly. What this message is asking is simply that you examine, honestly, whether your own particular loss genuinely falls into that permanent category, or whether you have simply assumed it does, out of understandable but potentially premature self-protection. Consider what genuine evidence actually supports your current belief that this particular door is permanently closed, distinct from the protective assumption that may have developed simply because continuing to hope felt too risky to sustain. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role gratitude plays throughout this particular process, not gratitude that denies genuine, ongoing grief regarding what was lost, but gratitude that exists honestly alongside continued hope for eventual restoration. Consider what you might genuinely appreciate about your life as it currently exists, even amid whatever specific absence this message has been addressing throughout its content. This gratitude does not require your original hope to already be fulfilled. It simply invites honest appreciation for what currently exists, alongside genuine, renewed openness to whatever restoration might still be possible moving forward. Consider the specific role that timing and life circumstance play throughout this particular process, since restoration sometimes requires certain conditions, whether within you or within external circumstances, to genuinely align before it becomes possible or appropriate. Reflect honestly on whether specific circumstances currently exist, either within yourself or within your broader situation, that may still need further development before this particular restoration could genuinely unfold successfully and sustainably. Examine, too, what specific role your own healing plays in your readiness to actually receive this particular restoration, should it eventually arrive. Sometimes people, understandably protective after significant loss, have not yet fully processed the original grief connected to that loss, meaning that even if restoration became available, genuine capacity to receive and sustain it might still require additional healing and preparation first. Consider what specific healing work, if any, might still be relevant to your own particular situation, work that would genuinely serve you regardless of whether this specific restoration eventually materializes or not, since genuine healing benefits you directly, independent of any specific external outcome. Consider, as well, what specific role forgiveness might play in your own particular situation, whether forgiveness of another person connected to the original loss, or forgiveness of yourself for whatever role you may have played, or believe you played, in that original loss occurring. Unforgiveness, when it persists unexamined, can sometimes quietly block genuine openness to restoration, even while a person consciously believes they remain entirely open to it. Reflect honestly on whether unforgiveness, toward yourself or someone else, might be operating quietly within your own particular situation, deserving genuine, honest attention as part of this broader process of remaining open to restoration. Explore, too, what specific spiritual or philosophical practice might support your continued openness throughout this particular process, whether prayer, meditation, or simply consistent reflection connected to whatever framework genuinely resonates with your own particular worldview and understanding. Many people find that periods of renewed hope, particularly after significant previous disappointment, benefit considerably from this kind of consistent, grounding practice, offering stability and perspective as genuine restoration continues to unfold at its own natural pace. Here is a final significant consideration before this message moves toward its close. What you believed was permanently gone may not actually be as permanently sealed as your protective explanations have convinced you it is. This does not guarantee a specific, immediate outcome. It simply invites you to remain genuinely open, rather than continuing to prematurely close a door that circumstances may not actually require you to keep closed forever. Release whatever shame or embarrassment might accompany admitting you still hope for this particular restoration. Shame does not accelerate genuine healing or genuine restoration. It simply adds unnecessary additional weight on top of an already difficult, tender subject. Approach this moment instead with genuine self-compassion, recognizing that continuing to quietly hope, even after significant disappointment, reflects genuine courage rather than any kind of foolishness or weakness. Before this message reaches its true close, take one final, quiet moment for yourself. Name, specifically, what you have believed was permanently lost. Notice, honestly, whether some part of you has continued hoping for its restoration despite your best efforts to convince yourself otherwise. Consider, gently, what it might mean to finally stop explaining that hope away, allowing yourself instead to hold it honestly, openly, without needing immediate certainty about whether or how it will eventually be fulfilled. This does not need to feel dramatic or overwhelming in order to matter significantly. It simply needs to feel genuine, honest engagement with whatever this reflection has helped illuminate, rather than either dismissing this content entirely or forcing unrealistic certainty about outcomes that genuinely remain uncertain from where you currently stand. Trust that this particular message reached you today for a genuine reason, connecting specifically to something real and significant within your own actual life and history, rather than arriving randomly or without genuine relevance to your particular circumstances. Something in you recognized enough significance to continue reading this far, past the point where you might have closed this message earlier had it genuinely carried no connection to anything real currently present within your own life. Consider, too, what it might mean to continue holding this particular hope gently moving forward, rather than allowing this single reflection to fade quickly back into the pattern of dismissal that has likely characterized your relationship with it until now. Perhaps setting aside a few minutes occasionally to honestly check in with yourself regarding this particular hope, noticing whether anything shifts or develops over the coming weeks and months. Reflect, as well, on how you will handle moments of renewed doubt that are likely to arise as you continue holding this particular hope more openly, moments when old protective explanations attempt to reassert themselves, insisting once again that this door remains permanently closed. These moments of doubt do not indicate that your renewed openness was somehow mistaken. They simply reflect how deeply ingrained the original protective pattern had become, requiring continued, gentle practice to genuinely shift over time. When these moments of doubt eventually arise, consider returning to this specific reflection, rereading whatever sections felt most significant during this initial encounter, allowing the content to reinforce your renewed openness even as its initial emotional intensity has naturally softened somewhat with the passage of time. Consider what specific record you might keep as you continue holding this particular hope moving forward, brief notes tracking whatever small signs, developments, or shifts you notice over time, evidence that can be difficult to fully appreciate through memory alone without this kind of ongoing, gentle documentation and attention. Think about what genuine restoration might actually look like as it continues unfolding, recognizing that it may not arrive as one single, dramatic moment, but rather as a gradual series of smaller developments that only become clearly recognizable as genuine restoration once you look back and notice the cumulative pattern that has quietly been building over time. Consider, finally, what it would mean to trust this process, even without complete certainty about its exact eventual outcome. Trust here does not mean passive certainty that everything will resolve exactly as hoped, without any need for continued reflection or genuine openness on your part. It means a kind of active, engaged trust, remaining genuinely open to whatever restoration continues to unfold, while also releasing the exhausting need for complete certainty about exactly when and how that restoration will fully arrive and take its ultimate, complete form. There is one more layer worth adding before this message truly comes to its close, something practical that ties everything shared today into sustained, meaningful engagement over the coming weeks and months ahead, ensuring this renewed openness actually continues developing rather than fading back into the same protective closure that has likely characterized your relationship with this particular hope until now. Consider what specific weekly practice might help you maintain honest, ongoing engagement with this renewed openness, something brief and sustainable rather than elaborate and likely to be abandoned once initial motivation naturally diminishes over time. Perhaps a specific evening each week, honestly reflecting on whether anything has shifted or developed regarding this particular hope, without forcing premature conclusions either way. Reflect on what specific evidence of genuine movement you might reasonably look for over the coming months, evidence that would help confirm authentic openness is actually developing, even when that development unfolds gradually rather than through one single, dramatic moment of complete restoration. Perhaps a growing capacity to speak about this particular hope without the same defensive explanation that once accompanied it. Perhaps small, unexpected developments that seem to connect, even loosely, to whatever this particular restoration might eventually involve. Perhaps simply a quieter, steadier sense of peace regarding this particular subject, distinct from either desperate, anxious hoping or complete, defensive closure. Consider, too, what specific role continued self-compassion plays as you develop this particular openness, since old protective patterns, especially those developed in response to genuine, significant pain, do not typically dissolve entirely through a single moment of recognition like this reflection alone. If old defensive patterns resurface periodically, even after this particular message, meet them with patience rather than harsh self-criticism, recognizing that genuine change of this kind typically develops gradually, through repeated, gentle practice over time. Explore what specific conversations you might need to have with people close to you as this particular openness continues developing, whether sharing with a trusted friend that you are working on remaining more genuinely open regarding this particular hope, or having specific conversations connected directly to whatever this restoration might actually involve, should genuine opportunity eventually arise. Consider what specific boundaries might still be genuinely wise to maintain as you continue this process, since remaining open to restoration does not require abandoning all reasonable caution or discernment. Genuine openness and reasonable wisdom can coexist, allowing you to remain receptive to genuine opportunity while still exercising appropriate judgment regarding what actually constitutes healthy, sustainable restoration versus something that merely resembles it superficially without genuinely offering the same quality of goodness that was originally lost. Reflect, too, on what specific self-talk patterns you want to consciously cultivate as you continue this particular journey, replacing whatever harsh, dismissive internal narrative may have previously accompanied this particular hope with language that honors both the genuine grief of the original loss and the genuine possibility of eventual restoration, without needing to resolve that tension immediately or completely. Consider what it would mean to view this particular process as an ongoing practice of remaining honestly open, rather than a single, isolated moment requiring immediate, complete resolution. Genuine restoration, when and if it eventually arrives, tends to unfold gradually, meaning your own capacity for sustained, patient openness matters considerably more than any single, dramatic moment of decision or realization. Consider, finally, what genuine gratitude might look like throughout this continued process, not gratitude that denies genuine, ongoing difficulty or uncertainty, but gratitude that exists honestly alongside continued hope, perhaps gratitude for having finally named this particular hope honestly today. Perhaps gratitude for whatever support already exists within your current life as you continue this particular journey. Perhaps simply gratitude for your own continued willingness to remain open. Despite genuine, significant previous disappointment. This message reached you today for a reason. Trust that. Carry it with you. And when you are ready, not before, not because anyone told you to, but when you are genuinely ready, take your next step. Deep down, you already know what that step is. Thank you for receiving this message today. Be gentle with yourself as you continue holding this particular hope honestly, one patient, open moment at a time. Michael says, "Thank you for finally stopping to listen instead of explaining this away one more time. What was thought gone may simply have been waiting, patiently, for exactly this kind of honest, renewed openness to finally arrive."